Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you guys all doing?
Good. Very good.
I'm so pleased to be here. Just by background, my name is Mike Quindazzi. I'm a managing director with PwC, and for the last 28 or so years, I've been helping large enterprises and emerging companies with strategy and global expansion. I focus a lot on business development as well as complex systems implementations. For the last few years, I've been really focused on the global megatrends, and there's really three megatrends that I'll be highlighting today, and also some typical use cases on where we're seeing artificial intelligence be applied in our clients, as well as PwC's 8 predictions for artificial intelligence in 2018. So that should be pretty exciting, right? When you take a look at the 3 trends we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about how this has uniquely positioned the world to be able to digest and develop and extend and implement artificial intelligence in a lot of ways throughout our lives. So I'll kind of fast forward through that till today, and then we'll get into the predictions. I'm also, if you guys, anybody on LinkedIn here? Okay, great. I'm out there on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, and I'm sharing every day the latest research on artificial intelligence and robotics and other emerging technologies and megatrends. So, please connect with me, and we can continue the conversation after this. So, getting into the megatrends, the first one I like to talk about is people and how people are changing. There's a few things. Number one, there's more of us. We're getting older. We're having less children. We're becoming more diverse. There's more people entering the middle class. The middle class in Asia Pacific in 2016 for the first time was bigger than that of the middle class in the US and Europe. We're seeing this change in people is not equal around the world. We're seeing half of the population growth between now and 2050. It's going to happen in Africa, in the African continent. We're also seeing age difference, like in Japan, the average age in 2050 is going to be 54 years old. In Uganda, it will be 21 years old. So in terms of where consumers are going to be and what type of healthcare they're going to need and how they're going to work, it's changing dramatically. More and more people are being educated. More and more people are becoming more diverse. It's sparking this era of creativity that we haven't seen before. At the same time, we're seeing another billion people join us by the year 2030, and another billion after that by 2050. So very interesting. And at the same time, you'll see there's 2 billion people that will be digitally banking this year, and there's another 2 billion people in the world that are still yet unbanked. So these people trends are really affecting kind of where business and society is going. And we'll get to the part around how artificial intelligence plays a role in that. One of the things to consider is, we've been talking, for those who have been around the business community for a while, we've been talking about the service economy for how long? I don't know. Feels like 10, 20 years. Well, actually, if you go back on this chart, you'll see that the services economy actually started, it's closer to about 100 years ago. Obviously, manufacturing and agriculture have been very important components of the world economy for the last 100 years. But there's been a lot of efficiencies and automation that have been driven there. There's also been a lot of value right in there, because in those industries you're creating a lot of value. But what's happened in the last few years, particularly, and we're going to go into this, we're seeing that in the services industry there's a ton of value to be created as well. And we'll get into how that's happening and why it's happening. One of the things that's going along with this shift in people is the types of work that people do has shifted from basically repetitive tasks, to tasks that are more uniquely human, that include a lot more decisioning and intuition. And we're going to see this trend continue as more and more people are educated, and more of this technology and education is democratized through the cloud and through mobile connectivity. If you think back here and you go, wow, that curve seems pretty steep, from 2000 on to, the future. But let's think about it, right? In the year 2000, there was just approaching 400 million people connected on the internet. It's a lot of people. Now it's approaching 4 billion. So a big change in terms of that. I mean, I I think back to the days when they first printed the Bible, right? I mean, people couldn't read. Now people could read. Now people have access to basically all the world's data, not just a single book. So some significant changes. The other big change is around economics. So we talked about people. Let's talk about economics, and that's really all around where the money is. And what's happening here for the first time in 400 years, economic power is shifting from the West, like from before the first industrial revolution till today, shifting from the West back to the East. Shifting from the West back to the East. And, I'm looking at here on this chart in terms of the G7 versus the E7. If you look at the G7, that's, US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Canada, right? And you look at the economic growth of those countries, and then you look at the E7, just as a collective group. You look at Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia, Turkey, Mexico. You'll see that, in past years, that group of countries has been growing at 3 times the rate of the E7. So this is what's shifting back. And it goes back to those people, because in every industrial revolution we had, there was some technology advancement, right? In the first industrial revolution, we had the printing press and the steam engine, and an influx of people who were moving into the UK. And obviously their GDP doubled in 100 years. In the second industrial revolution, we had the US, right? And we had the gasoline engine and electricity, and synthesized fertilizer was around by that time. And we had a lot of people moving to the US, right? And taking advantage of that technology, doubled the GDP in 50 years. And then you look at China, and you look at the amount of people that they've lifted up out of poverty, 500 million people. There's still more people that are coming, and they doubled their GDP in 15 years. And you look at places like India today, where they're growing, the fastest growing large economy at 7.5%. There's it's probably the youngest and the biggest country, where they have got another 800,000 people that are going to be joining that middle class. So what we're seeing is this massive shift. So there's more people who have more money in more places that are more educated and that have access to this development and all these ideas. And then the last one, which is getting us to the artificial intelligence piece, is really the emergence of technology advancements. And just a few kind of wow stats here, if you will. If you go back to the time when we first started thinking about going to the moon, a gigaflop of computing at that time cost $1.1 trillion. In comparative terms today, it costs 8 cents. So there's way much more ability and access to computing power. When you look at storage, the cost of storage, $3.5 billion for a terabyte of storage in 1964, or in other terms, in 1980, even a gigabyte of storage cost $300,000. Today, it's a terabyte they're saying is $27. It's even lower than that now. I mean, how many? I think we get 5 gigs free with most of our cell phone plans today in the cloud. So there's storage available to be able to get this data and put this data in one place. And then obviously the connectivity, the costs of connectivity. I mean, those of you who were around, at least when I was a kid, don't call, you wouldn't call cross country, or let alone call someone in another country, because of the cost. Obviously the cost of connectivity has gone down dramatically as well. Not as much, but it is coming down as well. That may be the ultimate constraint in the end. And what's happening around technology? It's really the proliferation of semiconductors. You guys have all heard about Moore's Law, and they're doubling the number of transistors on a chip since 1964, all this other thing. And what it's done is drive down the cost, and it's drive down the accessibility, and it's proliferated the number of semiconductors that are out there. And when you look at these semiconductors, are all doing some type of computing for us in some way, whether it's processing an invoice or it's determining facial recognition. They're all doing something for us. And if you go back to the mainframe days, just in relative terms, if we're in the mobile era right now, it's about 10,000 times the amount of semiconductors out there, as we kind of have more semiconductors embedded in devices everywhere, from our refrigerators to our cars, to other meters. And you go to the IoT age, which we're approaching very rapidly, it's 1,000,000x. Just the number of semiconductors out there, let alone the amount of computing power, right? So You add that with the data, right? Where when I was doing a lot of these econometric modeling projects, 15 years ago, we were going into companies and doing pricing elasticity, right? Figuring out how much the price of diapers should be at certain hours in certain parts of the countries, or how much rebate an automotive company should give in Texas for pickup trucks in the middle of winter versus in, California in the summer in a two-wheel drive vehicle. How do you, balance, how you want to spend that money, or how you want to, invest your marketing dollars? Do you want to invest your marketing dollars and say, hey, don't invest in that product line, you can get a higher return for investing in this product line, or better yet, do your marketing through billboards in Italy because that's going to have a higher return than TV in Germany. People have been doing this for years, but the way that we went around doing that has changed dramatically. Because the amount of data that's available, and also because of the technology and the computing power and the algorithms, the AI piece of it, that's what's really changed a lot. So not only is there more data, the types of data and where the data is housed is way different, right? In the past, it was all in tables and rows and columns and relational databases, and you're trying to build semantic layers to say, is this an apple? Is it a Macintosh apple? Is it something that's grown on a tree? Or is it a computer that I bought at a store? Today, it doesn't work that way. It's much more fuzzy logic and algorithms. So we're seeing this rise of artificial intelligence, which has been around for 70 years, by the way, this idea of artificial intelligence. And it's been around in terms of, in the academic world, and there's been different tribes and different approaches to artificial intelligence and different definitions about what artificial intelligence is. And in this last wave of artificial intelligence kind of hitting the news media and kind of coming into our lives in ubiquitous ways, there's been some purists out there that go, that's not artificial intelligence. But there's other people who are saying, well, this is absolutely artificial intelligence, and it's not an argument of whether it is or not. It's more about a productivity revolution that is going to continue some of the other automation trends that I shared earlier. Right now, what people are kind of looking at today, whether it's digital assistants or chatbots or sentiment analysis or facial recognition or any other machine learning in sorting through data and looking through patterns, there's a few different ways to kind of categorize. I think maybe in one way, I look at it as, maybe in the simplest, most layman's terms, I kind of look at it as, okay, this is things that can sort through stuff and make decisions, right? Or this is something that's more actionable, like an autonomous system that flies a drone, right? Or a piece of software that gets released in your back office to go do human tasks, whether that's screen scraping or validation or bank reconciliation, or it's some type of robotics, right? Or a self-driving car. So this is kind of how it perforates itself. But there is this one thing, that we at PwC are looking at it in terms of how this technology is advancing, and we kind of look at this human in the loop. And I don't know, has anybody heard that term, human in the loop learning? Okay, so the way this started was, and this recent trend was basically looking at a bunch of data and being able to classify it, right? Or a human coming in and saying, okay, yeah, those are all pictures of cats. Okay, so every time you kind of see this pattern or shape or these colors or this form, that's a cat. And, the human comes in and kind of validates it. And so that's kind of interesting, right? And then there's like no human in the loop, where you become to something that's more autonomous or self-learning that learns on its own. And so it's kind of taking different forms. Some of it is what we call supervised or semi-supervised. But this is kind of how we look at it, and I think eventually what you're ultimately getting to is maybe that bottom right was autonomous intelligence, where some of these systems are able to learn on their own and also assist us in ways without us prompting it or being in the middle of it. And there's a lot of issues, and when I get to the 8 trends, I'm going to talk about what those are and how that's going to work and how it's going to work in society. Don't know if this thing will play, but I mean, that might not play, that video. Maybe I took it out, but it's just a different sorting to say, to kind of give you a mind, and when I'm talking about data and sorting through data and how maybe some machine learning algorithms might be able to look at data and sort patterns in different ways, right? To kind of find groupings of things to make sense of stuff, right? Whether that's trying to figure out someone's credit score or trying to figure out based upon, Google looking at 50 million cars from Google Maps and trying to figure out what the demographics of a particular area might be or people's preferences might be. So sorting through tons of data using different types of neural networks. So in addition to the computing power being more available and having more data, the approach to doing this, and that's more of the diversity of people coming together to figure out new types of neural networks and new approaches to kind of sort through the data has been interesting. Last year, artificial intelligence, it was the biggest year for venture capital. Now, venture capital is only one measure. I mean, corporate investment is big, and government investment is another thing. Department of Defense investment is another thing. But venture capital, I do know last year was the biggest year for artificial intelligence yet. So there's a lot behind that hype, and there's a lot of real solutions that are manifesting itself in different ways. And that's because the markets, a lot of the forecasts, and this is a third-party company that does a forecast, just showing the forecast of artificial intelligence revenues growing pretty significantly for, the next decade or so. We surveyed a bunch of executives, right, asking executives that are kind of looking at their businesses and trying to find competitive advantages. We surveyed them to ask them, where do they think, we're going to see this stuff? And some of it's very practical. And when I get to my 8 trends for 2018, you'll see some of this. But some of these things are pretty simple things that, business leaders are looking for artificial intelligence to do. And you can kind of look through some of them, scheduling and timesheets and accounting and expenses and some HR functions, some email. And then also, some bigger problems that folks are looking at, whether it's cybersecurity and privacy or cancer and diseases. A lot of the work that we're doing right now with our Body Logic solution all around is going, looking at the genome sequence, trying to look for biomarkers in there, trying to fast forward someone's life in terms of how that genome sequence will play out, and then trying to do some predictive kind of analytics on, well, maybe this person should change their lifestyle. We can have some different recommendations for them around what types of medicines would work well with them in the future, or better yet, maybe some different lifestyle choices that they could take when they're starting to look at that. And then when you look at kind of some of the other forecasts in terms of the top 10 use cases, what the industry analysts are saying is obviously the first one is really around autonomous vehicles. We're seeing a lot of those features when you see lane departure warning and auto brake in our automobiles. We're seeing autonomous driving kind of enter our vehicles kind of one piece at a time, and all the OEMs kind of jumping into it. We were, Dino and I were talking earlier, in California, there's 49 car companies now testing autonomous car technologies. Like 49 companies, wow. 3-4 years ago, there was 1 or 2. You go back to the DARPA Grand Challenge in was that 2004 or 2007? It was the first time where DARPA asked 5 companies to come and drive across the Mojave Desert with an autonomous vehicle and go 150 miles. The difference is you go, wait a minute, we've had autonomous vehicles. They've all been joystick driven, like a lot of the drones back in the Gulf War. We're talking about true autonomous systems, be able to drive across a complex environment like the Mojave Desert. And the first year, I think it was 2004, the farthest a car company got was like 7.3 miles. The next year, 5 companies made it, and so you had a total of a couple hundred miles of autonomous driving testing. Today, if you go to some of these computer systems that are simulating driving, I mean, there's millions of miles of testing already on the road, and even millions more on computers. So that is definitely one area. The static image recognition, classification, and tagging. I mean, a lot of this started on Facebook. Anybody on Facebook? They know who your friends are and who you are on there by your picture. This used to be, when they first did this classification project, they did it entirely with humans, looking through pictures and helping out. Now it's, the computer's doing it, right? So that's coming up. The patient data processing, we talked about that, being able to kind of look at not only genomes, but even simpler thing like, just any vital signs, right? And think about continuously monitoring that rather than kind of taking your vitals after the fact when you're sick and in the doctor's office, So it's a very interesting approach. Trading, that's out there. Has anybody heard of the robo-advisors? Or maybe they have a robo-advisor in your financial planning. obviously an algorithm to kind of look at your demographics and help you with some of the planning. It's lowering the cost of what people pay for financial advisors, right? I mean, most people were paying about a point, 100 basis points. Now these robo-advisors are coming in at about 30 basis points, and some of them are performing okay. Mapping, predictive maintenance, so a bunch of things there. Last couple of years, we started to see some of these CEOs come out and share little tidbits. Like 3, 4 years ago, eBay kind of shared how they were using artificial intelligence behind the scenes. Google, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't even on their roadmap, artificial intelligence. Now there's, at last I checked, there was 103 different types of artificial intelligence they were using to help their search. I don't know, has it gotten better? I'm not sure. But actually in one of the quarterly reports of their annual report, Amazon kind of actually listed the way they're using artificial intelligence. So I thought this was just interesting to kind of take a look at what they have. And some of this are things that are used in the application in the background. Some of it's used in in some of their predictive analytics. Some of it's used for fraud detection. And then they're also packaging some of this stuff up to offer it as a service to other people. And then clearly you see their their Echo Dot now, where basically your artificial intelligence is in the cloud, and developers are working on it all the time, and it's getting new skills because there's skills developers who are adding skills to a skill store, much like we saw the proliferation of mobile apps join the mobile app store, right? Years ago there was no mobile apps, right? Now there's 6 million mobile apps, out there available at Google Play or at the Apple App Store. We're seeing the same kind of rise in skills because you have these diverse people from all over the world who can now submit their skills to the skills database and put their skills for sale or make them available for free. So we have this whole democratization of technology and all these diverse people from around the world adding their creative ideas in here. And it's becoming an AI brain, right, which everybody can access and pretty inexpensively, right? So it's something to be aware of. And even this is this was a collection that Goldman Sachs did of some different company data. And I just took a snapshot of 3 companies, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, in terms of what could you go buy if you wanted to buy some artificial intelligence, and how would it manifest itself? So I like the one here. You can buy the Emotion API, which is it's an interface, right, which detects emotions and images. Might be very interesting for a retailer or for an insurer who's looking at some behavioral economics. And how much is that? That is free to 25% per 1,000 transactions. So this is what I'm talking about, the democratization of technology. And we're going to talk about all these points when we get to the predictions and why this matters and how it goes. Been a big narrative out in the marketplace around AI is going to take my job, this robot's going to take my job. And there's some truth to that, right? Like I was on a panel with that Gavin Newsom, who's running for the governor over here. I was on this innovation panel, and he told this story, which was interesting to me, about how he's in the Bay Area and San Francisco, and they're promoting all these startups, and these startups come in and would talk to him about what they're doing, and and he kind of fast forward the conversation to when they raised the minimum wage, right? And they made the announcement they're going to raise the minimum wage to $15. He said the next day he picked up the newspaper. I guess he still gets the newspaper. And he said, it said in there $6.25 an hour. And he's like, what is this, $6.25 an hour? I'm the lieutenant governor. I said $15 an hour. Well, he sees the line on the bottom, and it says Momentum Machines. And he goes, I recognize them. They were one of those startups that came in here, was talking to me. And apparently they signed a contract with McDonald's to make the automatic burger flippers. And they did it because the minimum wage, they were saying, thank you for raising the minimum wage, because, now it's cheaper to actually run the computer, the robotics, than the people to do the job. So there's some truth to that. And so the media has been jumping on this, right? Because it's a good headline, it catches your attention. But when you actually look at some of the forecasts, there's a couple points I want to make here. Number one is, in the past, automation, and you saw those agricultural jobs go down, yet agricultural production has skyrocketed. What's happened when we've taken those agricultural jobs away or the manufacturing jobs away through automation, the economy has gotten that much bigger, and it's created that many more jobs. There's more jobs in the world today than there's ever been, and we're predicting more in the future. So a couple stats. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States here, they're predicting we're actually going to lose 1.2 million jobs by 2026. But they're also predicting we're going to gain almost 12 million. So what's happening here is the nature of work is changing. And the AI is causing this productivity, or is enabling us to continue on the productivity continuum. Much like a harvester did, right? A harvester can come in and do all the backbreaking work of picking the corn. You take 1,000 people out with one machine, right? And for those people who are picking the corn, that's a pretty hard message, right? Like, hey, wait a minute, you got to go get retrained, or you got to do something different in the value chain here, right? But there's more jobs today. There are more jobs today, and with AI, it's going to fuel a bigger economy on a relative sense. And this was a study that our economists did to kind of predict the future of AI and where it's going to benefit the most. And you can see, obviously, it's heating up to be a battle between North America and China in terms of who's going to get the highest returns. And when we talk to the most senior leaders in companies today, almost 3 in 4 believe it's a competitive advantage of the future. I think this is increasing as we go on. And when I talk to my clients today, these are the ways that they're actually using artificial intelligence today, or how they're planning to use it in the future. And there's just 24 different use cases. I mean, the interesting thing about this chart is you can see that these use cases are across almost every industry, and the applications are broad and wide. And, I don't think enterprises are going to be going to enterprise providers and saying, hey, sell me AI. They're going to be going and buying solutions or integrating solutions that have AI embedded in them, and that will be doing a better job than rules-based engines did in the past, or will be able to sort through data in ways that other solutions in the past haven't been able to, or will empower, right, rather than just not the decisioning, but also the physical action, right? When I was making that distinction in the beginning on AI, it's either stuff that's making a decision or making an action. And when it's making an action, it will come in the form of an autonomous vehicle, a drone, a robot, or a piece of software that would be let loose or let loose may not be the right term, but that can go into a system and actually do things, digital work that needs to be out there, or digital labor. And at the end of the day, I think everything here, just like with any other automation in the past, it's been at the will and discretion of humans. Now, humans are funny creatures in terms of what we like and don't like, and particularly now in a polarized world. And we're going to get into this, how we're going to sort through this, but these are good comments. So you could see some of those use cases. I think they're interesting. Let's get into some of the things that I think are just, because I just went through kind of a couple hundred years of stuff very quickly. So a few things I want to talk about in terms of kind of bringing this down to earth, in terms of where we're seeing these predictions for this year. So that was kind of all the past stuff and kind of where we're headed, but the prediction for this year. I'll start at the top where it says work, not jobs. We're not seeing jobs impacted. We're seeing lower unemployment rates, yet we're seeing artificial intelligence get down to work. Probably the biggest area where I'm seeing this year with my clients is all, and I think the largest job that's under pressure right now is the lower to mid-level office worker. It's not the truck drivers. It's not the manual labor. It's still very hard for autonomous systems to come in. I mean, there's robotic bricklayers and stuff like that, but if you want to have a new driveway and a fence put in and your house painted, kind of hard for artificial intelligence to robotics to do that. You know what I mean? Like, you still need people to do that. You're going to do it the way you want. So it's not really the jobs, it's the work, it's the nature of work. And I'll focus down there just in terms of some of these white collar workers, what I'm seeing. I mean, a lot of folks, if you're in a job, if you're in an office, and you're doing something that's very repetitive, like I'm doing bank reconciliation, and I'm going out and I'm checking this, and I'm matching this, and I'm matching it with that, and I'm doing it with this, and I'm clicking, and I'm pasting, and I'm cutting on the internet, and I'm working on a screen, and I'm working between multiple systems. I mean, that is a place where intelligent process automation is kind of going gangbusters right now. That is a place where a piece of software can sign into a system as your username and have the same roles, rights, and privileges as an office worker might have, and all of a sudden we have all these invoices come in that need to be processed. hey, train up this bot to go sign in as me and create 100 me's to go and do this and process this thing over and over and make some intelligent decisions. A lot of governance in that, right? Because you don't, a lot of change control. Like you can't change your other software because that could throw it off. But this is happening and it's working. And what people are doing here, this I would say is kind of a trend of, there was this trend to offshore, right? To arbitrage labor. Like let's go get a lower labor rate. Rather than doing this software development here in Los Angeles, let's go do it in Bangalore, in India, because the labor rate is 20%.
That goes away and affects the Indian economy, though.
Well, what's happened is, in a lot of these places, the global labor rate has not totally normalized, but it is in the process of normalizing, right? Because eventually you go, oh, wait a minute, we're going to charge more and more and more. The labor rate comes up in India. But the process for outsourcing anything, what most companies look at is, how do I take this and package it and then give it somewhere else where they can do it repetitive? That's where this type of automation that I'm talking about works well. And so what I call it is, instead of labor arbitrage, it's labor automation. It's a term out there right now, digital labor, which is driving people towards that. And what we'll see is that we'll also see more predictive stuff. Like on my team right now, I have a couple managers, and they were really well respected because they could go into the systems and they can write these reports and they can give them to management and they can present them in a nice way. Well, guess what? Right now we can sort through the data and we can do some more predictions. I don't need you to run that report, but I still need you. I need you to help me. Like, this software is actually predicting now, like which clients might have a propensity to do a deal, or might be looking to do global expansion, or might have an issue with their audit. Help me look through that and make sense of it. And then help me understand what we as a business should do to either help that client or help us to be in a better position. So that's kind of the shift that I'm seeing. Work, not jobs, is being impacted, not the type. The second thing, and you brought this up, is responsible AI. This is a very interesting kind of area, but it's, some people are calling it ethical AI, some people are calling it responsible AI. But as AI kind of proliferates itself into these different areas, there's going to be some decisions that are made. And we talked about the polarized world, right? So what is the right decision? So let's take one instance, like maybe AI is starting to be used to figure out people's credit scores. And maybe it's actually doing a good job of figuring out credit scores, and these people are making their payments. And I don't have to do it the old way. This is kind of interesting, right? People are going to jump on. But if you're not sure, and we're going to get to the explainable piece, but if you're not sure exactly how it calculated it, whether there was a bias in there or not, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful. So knowing what's inside the black box, the responsible piece, is important. And we're going to get to that. But on the responsible side, there's also decisions that humans need to make, and mankind, or humankind, or do they call it peoplekind? The Prime Minister of Canada called it peoplekind now. Peoplekind need to make. And you go, well, how do you do that when one group is over here and the other group's over here? And so there's been a lot of behavioral, research been done over the years. I take, for instance, like, if you ever heard of trolleyology, it's behavioral psychologists ask a lot of people the question about a trolley coming down the track. And it's trying to make a decision. There's a human sitting there, and this train's coming down the track, and you can actually switch this train, because it's going to kill a family of 5 people sitting in front of you. But you can actually decide to switch the tracks and send the train down the other track, and there's only going to kill one person. And 90% of the people over 90% of the people who ask that question, they say, well, sure, I'm going to save that family of 5 that's sitting right in front of me, right? You're going to save that family of 5, wouldn't you? You're going to go, oh, okay. But it's it's a moral decision. And it comes down to something that may be built into us, which is for the greater good. This is for the greater good. Well, they take that same question and they go, well, what happens if I had the 5 people on the track over here, and instead I had this large person sitting on this bridge, and I was sitting there talking to them, and I saw the train coming, and I'm talking to this person. I'm looking them in the eyes, and would you push that person off the track to save those 5 people? Push them off the bridge to block the train to save those 5 people? And 90% of the people say, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't push you off. You're sitting there, you're looking at me. Okay, so these are the types of decisions that when you start to build an intelligence system has to make, right? There was that story about the Tesla car that got into the accident. What decision should the car make if it's coming to an end-of-life decision for somebody? I mean, that's one example, right? The credit score is another example. There's just, when you start to look at this and all the places it's going to touch, you have to kind of understand human natures and humans' will and discretion in order to make it responsible. The next thing is the arms race. And it's powerful enough, AI, that countries are starting to invest in it. They're starting to plan for it. They're starting to create standards for it. You'll see the US, China, the UAE. You're starting to see, if you go search out there, different countries, they all are having a strategy around AI. And it's for a lot of reasons, for economic reasons, and it's for security reasons. For anomaly detection or for targeting. It's very powerful. I mean, some folks are saying, there's some stuff out there now, people are saying that AI could be more lethal than nuclear. Think about it. Has anybody seen the drone swarms, like maybe at CES or in China? They just ran one for the new year where they have 300 drones that are, flying in synchronicity. Well, you combine that with facial recognition, and if you were all my targets, and I knew all your faces, and I put drones up with a projectile in it, and I just had it programmed to crash into your head, I don't need a nuclear bomb. I just got rid of the entire leadership of some domain or sovereign nation I didn't want in power. There's some truth behind that fear, in terms of how this is going to be used. I mean, my mind being an optimist, I mean, at times I'm a pessimist, but being an optimist, I mean, I believe humans are generally more good when you look around the world, so you hope that we will continue in this path of being good. The explainable piece is interesting because earlier on I was talking about looking through this data and making decisions and using this human in the loop or this supervised or semi-supervised approach. That's part of it. The other part of it is, have you figured out an algorithm that's giving you a good answer? Or have you figured out an algorithm that's giving you a good answer but is also explainable? You know how it got there. Because if you don't know how it got there, then you don't really know what it's doing, and that's where the other pieces are. And there's companies now emerging. There was an interesting one I talked to yesterday called Sim Machine, and they're really focused on AI outside of the AI to explain the metrics around that AI and what it's doing and why it's doing it. It's opening up the black box, if you will. And that piece is something that is really coming to play here. The other one I have here is this AI cyber warfare. We're hearing about cybersecurity. We're hearing about breaches. The old approach was, hey, it's like a physical thing. Shut off your system, block folks out, don't let them in there. Well, unfortunately today, there's bad actors, there's nation states that are sitting in a lot of the enterprise systems today, and a lot of them go in there and they sit dormant, and they wait for a time where maybe some data is going to be exposed, or they can exploit something, or they can gather some information. Now a lot of stuff's moved to the cloud, and at first people were afraid to move their enterprise data to the cloud, their personal information, their credit cards, their whatever, their intellectual property. Well, what's happening now is this: the cloud's actually become more secure because you have the best anomaly detection. If anybody comes into that environment, they kind of can figure out who's coming into that cloud environment, and are they there, are they authenticated, are they not authenticated, and what are they doing, and what's suspicious behavior, and there's a way for us to contain them. Like now they'd rather have them in there and contain them rather than not knowing who they are. And it's kind of being able to deal with that threat actor. So there's been some pretty good advancements on AI as a cybersecurity tool, but there's also threat actors that are starting to use AI to outlearn the other ones. So we're definitely seeing this cyber warfare The good news is, in terms of the functional specialists, the good news is hopefully that you guys are here today, and hopefully I'm being insightful. But the functional specialists are the ones that will win here. When you look at being able to purchase AI for 25 cents per 1,000 transactions, and if you were a business leader, you don't necessarily have to hire all the machine learning resources to come and develop this on your own. But what you need is the functional people, the people who understand your business, who understand their function, who understand your industry, who understand this technology and where it is and how it proliferates itself, so that you can start to integrate that into the business, so that you can start to use it for your business, that you can start to be in your business. And the biggest thing I'm seeing, particularly for the larger enterprise, and I work with a lot of big companies, they all have back office systems. They have ERP systems, right? They have customer relationship systems. They have supply chain management systems. In the past, those were mainframes, and then they went to client server. Now they went to browser based. A lot of them were on premise, meaning that they were bought and installed on their premise behind their firewall, and it's their system. Very, very expensive to maintain, very expensive to upgrade. With the proliferation of cloud and software as a service, a lot of companies are moving more to a platform. And when you're with the platform that's secure, that's adding a lot of new technology. Like we just went live on the Salesforce.com system, which is a CRM system. Now we're on the platform. When they start adding features, we get them right away. But how do we deploy them, and how do we integrate them into our business process, right? How do we leverage them? Like one of them is the intro hive technology they have, which is actually doing some sentiment analysis. It's looking at my calendar. Who is Mike going to go meet with? What recommendations can I give him to go prepare for his meeting? And then on the back end, what can I do to help Mike follow up? And then also, how can I rank Mike's relationship with Ron, for instance? Maybe there's other individuals who are interacting with Ron more frequently or more intimately, and they go, Mike knows Ron, but maybe not as well as some other folks. So a lot of that stuff is around the functional specialist, right? It wasn't, I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer, I'm not going to code that machine learning to kind of figure that out, but I'm going to say, hey, here's a tool that's part of a platform that now that we're on the platform we have exposure to. How do I kind of integrate that and improve the productivity of my people so we can grow our business and hire more people, right? We want to hire more people. The world's all about people, isn't it? So don't get too lost in all this. It's about people. The next prediction there is this big data and ROI. And the big data and ROI piece is all about companies have all this data, and the way that they look at their data needs to be looked at with more of a keen eye, because people may have data they don't know they have data, or they have data that they haven't been able to get any value out of. So more and more people are looking at data as a value, some value they can get out of it. And one example here might be maybe you had you have one of the world's largest tractor companies, and you're doing predictive maintenance on your machines. You're going, okay, these machines have run for so many miles, and maybe you guys have that app for your car. It tells you when to take your oil change and stuff like that. Well, that's kind of cool. But maybe if you had these machines and you had a group of harvesters and you had a group of excavators, and maybe you could take your harvesters and go, is this data useful for crop production? Like, can I merge this with other data and use this for commodity markets for trading? It's like, wait a minute, I'm in the tractor business. Well, maybe not. Maybe your data for the future commodity prices of corn is more important now, because I have this data that I could sell to somebody, or I can leverage myself as a service. So we're seeing that in governments as well. Governments have a lot of data. A lot of governments, LA, they have got a lot of data. They've had some hackathons where let people come in and say, hey, create value from my data. I think now in the future there'll be new techniques to actually take a look at the data and say, hey, what can we do about our traffic problems? What could we do about our pollution? What can we do about a citizen engagement, whatever it may be? So new ways, and we're seeing a lot of that now, is companies that had lots of data are finding new ways to use it, and also understand what that data is, and understand that with AI, now I just don't need data in rows and columns, but I can be looking at PDFs. I can be looking at videos, right? I could be listening to audio. All this stuff is data, whether it's social media data or other data that's coming into the mix. And then the last one is just the the practical AI, and this kind of comes back to one of my earlier examples around this intelligent process automation, around AI actually doing a lot of work now. I think on the last survey we did, 54% of executives said that they were getting value from the AI that they deployed. And it was about the same number, it was about 1 in 2 or 50% that are actually deployed AI. I think some of the other execs don't even know that they've deployed AI in some ways. So it's something to take a look at for business leaders and for workers as well. I'm just going to summarize here. I talked a little bit about the black box and that becoming a priority in terms of understanding what's in it so we can understand how to leverage it. I talked a little bit about the data in terms of where there could be data that AI could be applied against, where it could be uncapped value for large enterprises, and those were some of the ones: public sector, power and utilities, industrial products, automotive. Those were kind of the big ones, energy and mining, and definitely technology and media. I mean, that's a big one. Healthcare, they're all really big. But public sector is the area where, in power and utilities, where the data is least likely leveraged today under the old methods, where under the new methods there could be more opportunity. Workers are becoming more open to the idea. We did a consumer and worker study where they said, yeah, I wouldn't mind AI assisting me, and actually I wouldn't mind AI doing my annual evaluation because it might be more fair than my current manager, which was interesting. Just a few things on what's holding it back is I think just not understanding, not sure. People are worried about the practical application. They're worried about runaway costs. They're worried about being responsible with it, disruption to their business, and you can see some of those on the top. I think the governance is an important piece, particularly on the software robotics. Anybody who's worked in large enterprise systems in the past, there's a lot to maintain in terms of the change control. So anytime you put some type of automated process in there, if it's not quite yet intelligent, you just don't want it to run amok, right? And send all your customers a bill when it's not supposed to, or credit a balance when it shouldn't. Or ship a bunch of products all over the world it's not supposed to. So definitely a lot of thoughts there. Just 4 things that I'm talking to the C-suite about today. Number one, identify practical problems around the business where there's things that are repetitive or that could use more intuition, where it's taking humans a lot of times to do repetitive things, or where maybe humans can't get their mind around the amount of data, particularly around employee sentiment or customer sentiment. I think there's huge opportunities there, and just make sure that your other leaders in your business are looking for opportunities and looking for solutions where the platform, like if you're not developing on your own, the platform is actually developing and it's part of their roadmap, right, in their product set, so that the AI piece is in there as a competitive advantage, and I can get on your platform, and as you have future upgrades and releases, you can take me along with you. So that's one of them. We talked about the talent piece, so that the head of HR, just around AI literacy and digital literacy. I mean, we're doing a big push right now we call digital fitness, and we actually put an app out there that we're bringing to our clients. We had all of our folks go through. It's a digital fitness app, and you have to go through and you have to be quizzed on how fit are you on digital, whether you're a programmer or not. And it was pretty scary for some of our leaders that they weren't as digitally savvy as they thought. They knew some of the buzzwords and things, but they didn't understand the functional aspects of it. The chief risk officer as well. We need to take a look at, they need to take a look at this whole responsible and ethical piece. Start asking questions. There's lots of groups out there to join that are out there that are bringing people and communities together to solve these issues. And the other thing, which I recommend to workers at all levels, is I've never seen someone who's tried to automate their role automate themselves out of a role. They usually automate up their role because they're helping other people either come along, or they become the champion of it, or they figure out the newer way of doing it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, some of this stuff is scary, but I look at it and I go back on my megatrends and I think, if we were all here 100 years ago, we'd all be probably making a campfire at night to stay warm. You know, well, that seems kind of ridiculous now, right? We just turn on the heater. So I think we're just moving. It's bringing people along. I think it is all about the people, and that's why the people piece and the upscaling is right there with it. My last one there is just around cybersecurity. This has been an area where companies are investing more and more in cybersecurity, particularly when we've seen some of the big data breaches, that have been out there. There's been some big names, Target, the Credit Bureau, others, and this is it. I mean, 10 years ago, I did a talk for FEI on well, maybe it was 8 years ago on the global megatrends, and one of the CFOs asked me, he said, "Well, my kid's doing a lot of YouTubing. You think you can make a career at that one day?" And plenty of people making a career at that one day, So, and yeah, in terms of the coding, I mean, I'm a kind of a two worlds. So my wife actually teaches at Johns Hopkins University for the Center of Talented Youth online, and she's teaching coding to these young kids. I mean, at the same time, I do think there's still a need for low-skilled labor. I think if you look at the college graduation rate and the high school graduation rate since World War II, it's doubled. And so I still think there's other jobs. I think there's going to be more pressure on a grand scale for that type of job, and we're going to need more people that, they've taken the wood shops and the metal shops out of the schools. I think we need people who do all types of things in the future. Well, this is very insightful comments, and I want to thank you guys all for being here today, and I can definitely answer a couple questions. I want to make sure I give our other speaker enough time as well. So that's really was the conclusion of my talk today. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you.